Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I want to talk about the news that's come out recently that Michael Keaton will be returning as Batman. In particular, obviously conflicting stuff, because some stuff is saying like it's only going to be for one film. Other stuff is suggesting that it might be for multiple DC films, whatever the case may be. It's not like it's official yet, but it's in talks. But at the very least, everything's saying that he's going to first appear in a Flash movie, which everything's still kind of pointing towards the first Flash movie still being a Flashpoint movie, because obviously that's always been kind of like the thing for the past couple years. And even like Andy Muschietti, who's the director of it, last year was talking about the fact that was the direction he was going to go, like with, you know, making a Flashpoint movie, which obviously everyone's been excited, because everyone feels like the Flashpoint movie could be the thing that kind of finally reconnects everything. Regardless, it brings up some interesting stuff, because like obviously it's like, oh, that's cool. Like I'm not like, some people are like kind of hesitant about it. Me, I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. I was like, oh, that's cool how you tie that together. The thing is, like, how do you tie that fully together? I'm trying to understand it like in the perspective of, you know, including this into a Flashpoint movie. Like, how would that make sense? And this is coming from someone who doesn't know the ins and outs of Flashpoint. Once again, I've, you know, watched the TV show version with the Arrowverse. Granted, I know that's a vastly different and a much more compact version of it. And then there's all, but obviously I talked about, like, I saw the Justice League, was it the Flashpoint Paradox, which is, you know, an animated movie adaptation of the comic book. So I've never read the comic book, so I'm probably not getting the full ins and outs, you know, even in the animated version. But regardless, spoiler alerts, you know, because like that's why, like, Bruce Wayne is dead in that continuity in Flashpoint. You know, his dad Thomas Wayne became Batman. That's the whole thing. So it's like, what role would why would he be there? Like, that's the whole thing. So that's what kind of confuses me on that, because I was about to say, not unless he's reprising the role of Batman, as in he's playing technically his own father, as in he's playing Thomas Wayne. But nothing I was reading said that. It sounds like he's playing Bruce Wayne as, you know, the same Batman from, was it Batman Returns, the Tim Burton Batman. So like that's what I'm confused about. So it's like, I mean, to be fair, once again, Andy Muschietti said that his version of Flashpoint, he's going to do something different. So I'm assuming that like things aren't going to be like beat for beat. There's going to be elements of it while still kind of being its own thing. And maybe this Batman thing kind of coincides with that, because I'm just like, I mean, not unless it's a thing of like post Flashpoint, like when Barry, spoiler, undoes everything, but when he returns to present day, it's like, oh, nothing's quite the same. The literally entire universe, even though you try to fix things, it didn't 100% sink back, which is interesting. And when you actually think about it, I guess because the movie was a one-off, it didn't do that. Obviously the TV show keeps that to a certain extent. Once again, it's on a smaller scale, but there's ramifications still existing from him doing Flashpoint that made changes to everyone's lives, to people important to him. Obviously the same thing could be said because of Crisis. We'll get to that, you know, that's a whole thing in itself. But the fact of the matter is, I'm curious, is that supposed to be like, oh, when he returns to present day, like maybe it's supposed to be, instead of like Ben Affleck's Batman, in fact, it's actually an older Bruce Wayne. Because I mean, to be fair, Batman within the DCEU's continuity was, you know, Ben Affleck's Batman was older anyway, obviously, like discrepancy in age and stuff like that. But that could be a way to do around that. You could be like, oh, and he's like, whoa, who are you? I'm Bruce Wayne, Barry, don't you know? Wait, what? Oh man, crap, all this stuff I changed because I reversed Flashpoint. Oh no, not unless they're setting that up, which I could see that being the angle they could go down. But obviously a lot of people are suggesting like maybe he's in a more mentorship form, which obviously it's like, obviously when you hear him returning as Batman, him being himself and, you know, his age and everything, you're like, oh, an older Batman. Possible live action Batman Beyond, you know, like that's literally what everyone and their grandmother is like hoping for. I mean, even before now, even with this news, before this news came out, like, oh wow, that's always been something people have circulated, like for a live action Batman movie, you know? Well, Batman Beyond movie specifically. I was watching Batman Beyond, and they were kind of suggesting like, oh, him being kind of more in a mentorship role, obviously still, but instead of doing like a Batman Beyond Terry McGinnis thing, they could do a whole Batgirl thing, which I thought, oh, that'd be interesting, considering especially because that's a character that hasn't really been tapped like live action wise since I think Alicia Silverstone played her like in the 90s. Like I think that was the last time that character's popped up live action wise. So, you know, I mean, there's always been talk about making a Batgirl movie, so that could present that opportunity, which is also interesting too when you think about the whole like Birds of Prey situation, because you have Cassandra Cain, who would eventually become, well, her character is Orphan, but for a while she became Batgirl before she later on just became her own person as Orphan. I think that's her moniker, if I remember correctly. I'd actually read, I'd like glimpse across something else that did bring up something interesting too, because it's like technically, Batman Returns is actually part of like the Arrowverse now too, because I mean, to be fair, everything's actually technically connected because of Crisis, because Crisis literally pulled in everything. Because if I remember correctly, one of the things they show in part 1 is like, was it Gotham 89, and that's supposed to be a wink and a nod to Batman Returns, if I remember correctly. So it's like technically that's already part of Crisis, which obviously we had, you know, Ezra Miller's Flash pop up in Crisis, which now I'm still thinking about. It's like, that's still so freaking dope. So it's just like it all already kind of technically all exists, and I guess they're going to use Flashpoint to kind of solidify it even. I don't know, because the biggest question has always been like, Ezra Miller popping up in Crisis, what does that mean for the movies and the TV shows? Like, what does that mean? Is it just kind of like, oh, it's fun shenanigans, throwaway thing? Great that he disappeared because all the worlds disappeared, but to be fair, we haven't gotten there continuity-wise within a Crisis situation or post-Crisis. But obviously, like, currently there's supposed to be only one Earth Prime, but technically there's actually others because, well, Doom Patrol takes place on a different Earth, and like it's like 20 something. Titan takes place on a different Earth, it's like 9, and obviously Stargirl is currently ongoing, and that technically takes place on Earth 2. So it's like the continuity hasn't really caught up, just maybe just because of where everything is. But eventually, Crisis shows that like eventually the multiverse stacks out. So like you can make the argument, like obviously, I mean that's another thing to this too. Like they could play with that. I don't know if they're going to, because it's like the people who've seen Crisis and everything is still a smaller scale than the people who've probably seen the DC movies. Because there's probably plenty of people who watch the DC movies are like, wait, what? Crisis? What the hell are you talking about? So it's like that probably won't be something they necessarily. I don't know. That maybe just been for the TV audience. I don't know if that's something they will necessarily reflect with the movie audience. That's just always been the thing. Once again, that's the whole complicated situation with this whole DCEU thing, which even that's like, it's not even technically the DCEU, because I mean, I looked it up like a year or two ago, and it's like, well, that's just kind of the name other people have given it. Warner Brothers has technically never co-signed on the name DCEU. It's just kind of a name that everyone else has kind of given their cinematic universe and just kind of ran with it. And just I don't know if they necessarily co-signed it now. Maybe they do. I don't know. When I looked up it a while back, they didn't, but who knows? Like I said, I'm just like I'm not. It's not like I'm against this whole Michael Keaton thing. Let's circling back to it. Like in no shape or form. I'm just curious to see how it gets implemented. Like I said, it just gets my mind running at like a million miles an hour, trying to figure out like, well, how would you piece that together? And once again, this is coming from someone who is not knowledgeable in comic books in whatever shape or form, but just piecing together stuff I've heard from conversations with other people, my own limited, experience and knowledge of DC Comics that, allow me to kind of, try and think like, how would that all fit together? It's like I'd be curious to see what that means. I mean, hopefully it does end up coming through. The entire time I'm having this whole conversation, I'm forgetting. I was like, oh, let's not forget there's Matt Reeves, the Batman with Robert Pattinson. But at the same time, it's like, well, we had Joker, which is supposed to be an Elseworlds thing. But I mean, obviously the Flash definitely plays heavily into the whole multiverse thing, because I mean, he's probably like the one hero in the setup currently that could easily just kind of bounce from one multiverse to the other. I mean, obviously kind of does it on the TV show, but that's why I'm wondering, like, I'm curious to see how they pivot this whole situation and just like what that means in the grand scheme of things. I mean, I think there's like multiple directions this could be applied, and it can mean so much. It comes down to what their ultimate plan is with this whole thing. If it, like I said, if it kind of goes through, I'm hopeful that it does, because I think it'd be kind of neat, because it also presents an opportunity to be like, once again, it's kind of like, I mean, because that would also be set up eventually, like, would the movies do their own version of Crisis, even though we had like Crisis in the Arrowverse, which even once again, that literally pulled in everything, because by pulling in Ezra Miller's Flash, you're like, oh, all those movies are part of the Arrowverse as well. That's all, like, everything is kind of under one continuity, even though they're just taking place on different Earths. I mean, that's could always be your wiggle room around it, So regardless, like I said, it's just kind of where my head is with the whole situation. Like I said, at the end of the day, what I want more so than anything would be a Batman Beyond movie. Like, come on, like. We've never really seen the heavily sci-fi Batman live action wise. Like, obviously there's been science fictional elements, but like a full blown, because especially like a live action movie, they can heavily lean into like the cyberpunk aesthetic and stuff like that. Like, it'd be sick to see that live action. Maybe this could be stepping stones towards that being a possibility. Like I said, that's the thought me and many, many, many other people have had. this is where my mind is. I'd love to get to know your thoughts about it. Are you excited about Michael Keaton coming back potentially as Batman, and what role do you think he could play in, you know, all of this? Because a lot of things are kind of saying like he could be the glue that eventually like pieces this universe. He could be the connective glue that kind of like bounces from all these different properties to kind of bring all the DC movies back within continuity. Especially that's kind of what people are leaning towards Flashpoint kind of doing. But regardless, let me know your thoughts about, you know, the whole Michael Keaton thing and what you think it could mean in the grand scheme of things for the DC movies or just DC in general. But really, that's what I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.